Sandra, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think when I was younger, I really loved dancing and performing. And my mom often says that. So I think when I was younger, I really wanted to be a dancer and a singer. What I wanted to do.
Oh, that's awesome. And what do you think it was about dancing and performing that called out to you?
The more I spend time in this body, the more I realize that dancing is one of my favorite ways to reconnect with myself and reconnect
Mm,
with my body. I just love that part of it. And I don't know, I think music brings so much joy
mm,
to my heart, I think.
that's beautiful. Well, do you mind sharing your journey? So, I picked up your book at Barnes and Noble and loved it and was so excited when you
Oh,
accepted my invitation to be on the
oh, I'm
podcast.
so glad you liked it.
Yes. So I'd love to talk about your book, but maybe if we could start with your journey to the point where you are writing this book. What did you
Yeah.
major in college? Your journey was not straight author, right? You started off in a different
Yeah.
career. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like I said, I love performing and all of those sorts of things when I was younger, and to the point where I did some acting. So I wanted to pursue that. Like,
Mm.
I don't know if it is a Latin family or a Mexican family or just my family, but my family was like, you're not going to make money like that. You. So I went into chemical engineering. I became an engineer,
Mm,
and then I worked in the food industry for about 20 years.
mm,
And I had a beautiful career. I just also happened to love food, everything about food,
mm,
and getting to participate in food production and food product development. I just loved all of it. But towards, I would say, around 2010, 2009, something started not feeling right to me.
mm,
2006 is when I found the law of attraction and really started
mm,
working on myself, working on creating more of a life that will make me happy. Before that, I was very frustrated. I felt very stuck.
mm,
So I started therapy also around that time. So by 2009, I was already on my way to reconnecting to the person that I really am.
mm,
And by reconnecting, I think I started noticing that many of the things I was doing, although they were exciting and they were fun, they weren't necessarily what made me really happy. I often think about the movie Soul. I don't know if you saw that movie, but
yes.
they talk
Yes.
about when you get in the flow and the guy is touching, is playing the piano and he's in between heaven and earth. It was something that made me happy, but I don't think it was that thing that
Mm,
kept me in the flow. That started kind of like the search. So what is the thing that keeps me in the flow?
mm,
But prior to actually decided to look, I kept thinking, well, maybe it's the job. So I
mm,
changed jobs and then I moved to England as an assignment. And then that wasn't it. So I'm like, well, maybe it was the company. So I
mm,
changed companies again to a different
mm,
company. And by the end, the journey, it took probably 6, 7 years to finally say no. I
mm,
mean, I'm literally in the job that I dreamt of when I was fresh out of university. Even at this job, I'm not the happy person I thought I would be.
mm,
I was leading North American innovation for one of the largest food manufacturers in the world, and I still wasn't feeling how I thought I was going to feel.
mm,
And it
mm.
was at the time that I'm like, okay, so how do I want to feel instead? And then what could make me feel that way? Literally, I will try anything. I did Reiki first. I knew it had to be something along the lines of spirituality, helping other people. So I did Reiki and I liked it, but it wasn't it. Then I did angel card
Ah,
reading. I have my cards in here and I liked it, but it wasn't it. So
mm,
finally, in a local college where I live, they have coaching certification and I did that. And I was like, this is it.
mm,
This is it. So at the beginning,
mm,
I started coaching people where I worked. So I did that at the same time I was working. But it
mhm,
wasn't long after I decided to leave my job. I got a job that was a little bit more flexible. I took a pay cut, but I just wanted something that would give me the flexibility to continue exploring what will make
mm,
me connect
mm,
with myself even more. Anyway, long story short, I started doing coaching, and it was through the coaching that I was talking to a friend once, and I'm like, I see that most of the people that are stuck or that come to me, they are usually stuck in one of three areas.
mm,
They don't know what they want. They know what they want, but they don't know how to get it. Or they know what they want. They know how to get it, but they can't get themselves to do it. They are stuck.
mm,
So there seems to be like a lot of patterns in what I see. And that's when my friends say, why don't you write a book? Never thought about it, but it kind of like stuck with me. And then I
mm,
always every year I take a personal development class. And that year, Hay House was having the writer's workshop in Toronto. I was living in Toronto, Canada at the time. I went and took the workshop. And then at the end, you get to submit a book proposal. They picked my book, and that's how
Ah,
everything happened. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, that was a long story, but basically
No.
that was it.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that because part of the reason I started this podcast, I'm a coach. I do career transition
Mhm,
coaching and life coaching. And one of the reasons was I was in accounting, the financial world, and I didn't feel like I was using my strengths. I was very people oriented. I
mhm,
wanted to help people. So I pivoted in my career. And I created this podcast because I wanted people to hear stories of other people who were doing work they loved and hear that it's sometimes not a straight path and kind of hear the story behind it. So I love that you had reached this level of success leading a big organization and that still didn't feel like enough because there's listeners out there listening who are thinking, I'm in the role I dreamed about. And it still doesn't, and especially with this
I know.
pandemic, it doesn't feel like it's it. Did you struggle making that transition? Because I know for me, it was difficult to leave the serious, technical, respected role to do something that was a little bit, quote, softer with coaching.
Yes,
And you were in
yes, absolutely.
engineering. Yeah. How
I
was
know.
that for you?
Yeah, it doesn't get, when you talk about human science or something soft, it doesn't get harder than that, right? Like engineering, like it did take me a long time. I mean, I started getting the nudging around 2009, and
Mm,
I didn't leave the industry until 2016
mm,
because I kept thinking maybe a different job. So then I moved to England to a new assignment, and then that didn't work out. After 3 years, I returned to Canada and thinking maybe a different company. But then one day I had to be honest with myself.
mm,
I look at myself literally in the role that I have dreamed of my whole career, leading an iconic brand, innovation, which is like when you're a food product developer, that's what we used to do. That's like the dream job
mm.
as a food product developer. And then I was doing the job and I still wasn't happy. And when I quit, I remember I told my boss, because by the way, I also had a fantastic boss. So I couldn't even blame my boss, like he was
That made
like
it
the
harder.
best. I had the best boss I've ever had in my career, my
Mm,
22-year career. And I remember telling him, this is my dream job, but it's not my dream life. I was working 50 to 60 hours a week. I was traveling 1 week a month. By the time I quit, I actually realized that in average, I had traveled 1 week a month for the last 13 years.
wow.
I was sick of airports. I was merely booking my next flight as I was waiting for my
Mm,
flight. I was always traveling. I was always on the weekends answering emails. And I mean, if that's what fits with you, that's perfect. I had a 2-year-old at the time. I was realizing that many of his milestones, I was traveling, and
mm,
I'm like, it wasn't just the job. The job was a big part of it and
yeah.
what made me happy, but it was also all of it, the lifestyle, the
Mm,
ability to spend time with my family, the flexibility, all of it. And
mm,
that's when, I mean, like I say, it took me 7 years, but eventually
mm,
I had to be honest with myself.
mm.
By that point, I still have 20 something years to retire. And I'm like, that seems like a long time to
Yeah.
be in a job that is not quite it, right?
Mm. Oh, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, so open about the length of time it took, because I think there might be someone listening who's beating themselves up about having a dream or thinking about switching and taking so long to do it or sitting on the idea. And so I love that you shared that it took a long time, that you tried different things, different roles, different countries before you were able to figure out, yep, that voice is still telling me that it's not
Yeah.
it.
I often tell people ignoring our dreams, it doesn't make them go away.
Mm,
It's
mm.
like ignoring that you're allergic to peanuts and then have peanuts. I mean, just because you don't think about it doesn't mean you're not allergic to peanuts. It's the same
Mm,
thing. Just because you don't allow yourself to dream it, it doesn't mean that you don't have that dream. And that dream will nag you and nag you and nag you, and it doesn't go away.
mm. The other thing that stood out to me was you said you left in 2016 and we're in 2022 recording this, but you're a published author,
I know.
2016 to 2021. That's such a short amount of time.
I actually started writing the proposal for my book in 2018 and then
Wow.
officially sold my book to Hay House in 2019.
That's amazing. Though it strikes me as like how fast that dream was able to come true once you started taking action and aligning. And I love how you have said several times in this interview, connecting with yourself. That's so
I
beautiful.
know. It's so important. Again, I've been doing the law of attraction now. March of this year, it's going to be 16 years that I found the law of attraction. And the more I do it, the more I realize that alignment is just another word for connection, authenticity, connecting with who you are, connecting with what the universe has for you or where the universe is calling you to, and then being authentic. I actually think the new alignment is authenticity. It's about how can we find more ways to be more of ourselves as opposed to less of ourselves. Especially, I think capitalism is like, you have to become this person to be successful, right? You have to be assertive but not too assertive. You have to speak the corporate language. You have to dress a certain way. I mean, there's that famous saying, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. But then what about dressing for who you really are? What about being who you really are? And if a company, I recently did a video about it, if you have to change yourself in order to be in a certain space, that space is not for you. Because the calling is never to be less of who you are. The calling is always to be more of who you are.
Oh,
So,
that's beautiful, Sandra.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's so inspiring and so motivating. And I want to go back to that point where you talked about law of attraction. I think there's a lot of people who kind of roll their eyes at that.
I know.
Who like manifestation, who law of attraction, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily resonate with them. What you're saying is really connecting with who we are. So you wrote a book and it's wonderful. And it's called Chica, Why Not? How to Live with Intention and Manifest a Life that Loves You Back. What you'd like to share with the audience of some important points that you want people to know that you've shared in your book.
Yeah, when I was thinking of how to put together the book, I'm very much about steps. Hay House is very much about steps, so it had to be something like that. But then when I was trying to come up with the steps, by the way, I came up with the step first, and then I did coaching with Latinas and validated the steps and ended up changing a couple, ended up adding a couple. But basically, the book is two parts. The first part is basically the mechanics of the law of attraction, right? Which is you become clear on what you want. You collaborate with the universe by aligning your energy and taking inspired action. So those are the first three steps: clarity, collaboration, and commitment. Commitment was actually a step that I added after talking to people, because I realized that many people think the law of attraction is like magic. Like, I'm just going to light the candle, do my vision board, and it's magically going to appear before me. But the truth is, you cannot win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. You have to take inspired action. One of my favorite sayings is by Joseph Campbell that says, take one step towards the gods, and the gods will take 10 steps towards you. But you have to take the first step. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that law of attraction is not this thing where you just kind of wish it and it happens, although sometimes it might feel like it. But there has to be some step that you take, because when we talk about energy, there is no stronger energy than action in the universe. So that's the first half, which is the mechanics and how it works. But then if it was that easy, everyone will have this amazing life, right? You read the book about the law of attraction and you will have this amazing life. But the truth is that the alignment piece is where, I wouldn't say everyone, but many people get stuck in there. And I wanted to make it easier for people to know how to get themselves back in alignment. And then alignment, again, is that piece about connecting with yourself. How do you connect with the person you are, not the person society, church, family led you to believe you were, but the person you really are? In my case, that little girl that loves dancing and loves helping people and loves having this connection with spirit, as opposed to maybe the engineer that's like keeping projects and looking at budgets. I mean, we all still have to do things we don't like to do. I mean, I have to send invoices for my business. That is not my favorite part, but it's like the biggest context of it. You get to spend more time doing things your way and the way that makes you happy. So the second part of the book, I call it the growth part of the book, which is how do you, first of all, identify in those areas where you are feeling less than, where you're not feeling happy or you're not feeling your best. Identify them, become curious about them, so that you can stack some of like an onion. You start removing the layers to really see what's at the bottom of it. And many times our beliefs rooted in I'm not enough, I don't deserve, and then transforming those through compassion, through loving that part of you that's feeling inadequate. You walk into a room and you're the only Latina in that room, and your heart just kind of shrinks a little because you're like, oh crap. So how do you identify that part of you that is feeling threatened, that is not feeling safe in this environment? And then just lovingly support yourself and love yourself through that phase where you might be feeling less than or not safe or whatever it is. I always say you cannot shame yourself back into alignment. You can only love yourself back into alignment. So how can you lovingly support yourself back into reconnecting with the person that you really are, which is this kick-ass Latina that just walked into a room, breaking glass ceilings and all those things, right? Reconnect with that person. And then the last one is just, I call it continuity because I wanted all the steps to start with C. But basically, it's just awareness. At every moment of the day, just start noticing when something doesn't feel good and know that that is almost like your inner child, the spirit pulling on your sleeve saying there's something you need to pay attention to. Right here. Maybe if you feel a little bit of anxiety and it's like, okay, just take 5 minutes just to stop and be like, what is going on? What is happening here? And what are the thoughts I'm telling myself that are making me feel anxious, or they're making me feel stuck, or they're making me feel frustrated? And then once you start identifying those, you can start deconstructing them because some of them are not true, or you can start mitigating. You might find that maybe you're afraid of what if I fail? Well, how can you support yourself? Success is never a guarantee, but there are ways you can mitigate that, right? For example, if you have a business and you're like, what if the business fails? Well, what about looking at ways to making your cash flow stronger, for example, so at least financially you're okay. So those sorts of things. So that's how the book was put together.
Oh, I love that. And you know what stood out to me as I'm reading it, as a coach, I can recognize when someone is a good coach and who's done a lot of work. And that's very clear to me as I'm reading this book, that you've done a lot of work, that you're an amazing coach. And
thank you.
This book is a blessing. And it's helped me, and it's helped me think about, what do I need to do to raise my energy, my vibrational energy, to meet the goals that I've set out for myself. The other thing that I'm loving about it is the self-love piece, the compassion piece. I think that's so important. And that's what I see too in client conversations. Once we go deep, we can start about career transition, pivots, all that stuff, balance, boundaries. But at the end of it, it really comes down to that self-love and compassion. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. What have you done to promote that within yourself and within your clients? Because I think I have a sense that there's someone listening who needs to hear it.
It hasn't been a straight road. Definitely took a long time to even tolerate myself, I think, at some point. But then slowly trying to find the places where I feel the safest, I think. Many times it comes down to safety, right? And as I do that, as you start loving yourself just a little bit more, maybe you can go from not even thinking about yourself to tolerate yourself, to maybe liking yourself, to maybe loving yourself. And as you do that, you start acting like it. You start creating safer spaces for yourself. You start cutting things out of your life that no longer contribute to that. I remember one time, I mentioned it in the chapter of compassion, the one where I talk about my weight and my struggles with my weight. That's definitely been an area where I had to learn how to tolerate myself, like myself, maybe love myself, maybe. And I remember there's this amazing Chicano teacher that Sylvia, that's her name. And she teaches inner bonding, which is basically child work, right? Connecting with your inner child. And a friend of mine has been like a huge fan of her for years. And because she used to do a lot of work locally in California, now she moved to Oregon, but she has a lot of followers. But she's not very active in social media. It's really through one-to-one and referrals. So my friend moved to Wisconsin, and long story short, she was holding a weekend retreat. And she said, why don't you come? And I hadn't seen my friend in a long time. And I'm like, sure, I'll go to Wisconsin, come and check it out. And remember, every year I do a personal development class. So that was the class I did in 2018. I was writing the book at that time, and I was actually writing the compassion chapter. I remember talking to her how this is very vulnerable, what I'm going to share. But I remember saying everything I've ever wanted in my life, I've accomplished. Everything. career-wise, financially, anything I've ever put my heart to, I've ever accomplished. But the weight is something that I always struggle with. And she told me, Sandra, that's because you always father yourself. You haven't mothered yourself. And when she told me that, it became so clear how I've dealt with that area of my life. I've always shamed that side of me. I've always was like, come on, Sandra, why can't you get it right? You can get right everything else. Why can't you get this one right? What's wrong with you? And what she told me that time was, Sandra, what you need is to nurture that side of you, is to mother that side of you. And I realized how much in my life I have been this masculine energy of driving, getting it done, against all odds, making it happen. In the book, I talk about sticky points, the areas of our life that create a lot of shame within us. And everyone has a sticky point. It might be finances, it might be love, it might be, in my case, my body. Everyone has one or two. And those areas in particular are the ones that need the most love. They're the ones that have the most pain attached to them. And again, you cannot shame yourself into alignment. You can only love yourself. And it's connecting with that part of you. And that was the moment, actually, I realized, I read a lot of personal self-help kind of books, how much I really dislike the very masculine driven books. Get yourself to do it and work hard at it. And how much I love those books that give a space for self-love and reconnection. And also that actually changed a lot of the way I talk. Even though in the book I had already written by it, it's amazing. There are no coincidences. The fact that I connected with her when I was writing that chapter, and I actually do include a conversation there because it really changed the way I look at a lot of things. And even this is more recent, maybe last year, it's not even included in the book, of how much I do believe now that alignment is just really about connecting. It's about connection. It's about removing all of the barriers to connection. A Course in Miracles says that we cannot define miracles, but what it can do is that it can help us remove the barriers to the awareness of love. And I think that's what alignment is. Alignment is not what you do, it's what you don't do. It's what you don't allow to come between you and who you really are, and between you and who your higher self is, whatever you want to call it, God, nature, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it.
Well, thank you for sharing that vulnerable piece of your life in the book and just now too, because I think people will connect with that because we all have those sticky points.
Yeah.
We all have them.
We all have those places we don't talk to people about.
We don't talk shame.
It's like we don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about the sticky place.
The other part that I was thinking about as you were talking was someone's thinking, that's me. How do I start loving myself? What does that look like? How do I even begin? Or even maybe some people may not even realize that self-love is not as strong as it could be. Sometimes like I'll have client conversations. And part of it is like this inner critic is beating them up constantly. And I think the other side of it, I always call it the inner leader, but I think the inner leader shows us love. And I think that's what you're saying. And so how do people recognize it, that they need it? We all need it, I know. But like, how do we show it to ourselves? What have you found?
There is no destination when it comes to self-love, just like there's no destination when it comes to growth and expansion. You were always evolving and we're always growing and we're always peeling that onion. I have a fantastic coach. Her name is Ronnie Davis, and she talks about loving your body and living in your body. And last week, she told me something, and I'll make sure when this comes up, I'll put a shout out in the comments or something to her, because she said something. I love collecting things that change my life, like little phrases, like the one about mothering yourself. She said, Sandra, to accept yourself, you don't need to even love yourself. You don't need to love yourself. You just need to accept yourself. And I was like, wow, that is so profound, because what I was just saying, I literally started by tolerating myself. If you're in this place of full-on disconnection where you don't even like the person that you are or the life that you're living, then just start by acknowledging it. Acknowledge what that feeling creates in your body, how it makes you feel, and just sit with it. Don't ignore it, don't push it away, don't shame it, just sit with it. And let whatever feelings come up. It might be a profound grief, it might be sadness, it might be anger, it might be whatever it is, just allow it to happen. And then just accept it. And accepting, again, doesn't mean that you have to like it or you have to love it. It just means you make peace with it. One of my favorite definitions of forgiveness is by Oprah. And I think she interviews someone in a show and she changes slightly, but she keeps repeating it, which is forgiveness is letting go of the hope that the past could have been different. So it's about forgiving yourself in a way that you stop wishing you were something else or you were somewhere else than you're not. Just saying, this is who I am and this is where I am. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're going to be here forever. Just means you're accepting where you are. And then when you are in this place, when you allow yourself to feel that sadness, that anger, that frustration, whatever it is, just asking yourself, how can I lovingly support myself through this? That is the first step to love. At that point, you might not even love yourself. You might be willing and open to see, okay, from where I am right now, how can I support myself? And that might look like I'm going to set boundaries with people that are not nice to me. That might mean with I'm finally going to look for a place that feels safe for me, where I'm safe to be me. Or that might be with I'm going to make that appointment with the dentist. Or, whatever it is, right? Yeah. You start supporting yourself through that. And because of the law of attraction, energy flows where attention goes. Once you start putting your attention into ways to support yourself, ways to lovingly support yourself, the universe is going to want to bring you more of that. If you believe in the law of attraction. If you don't believe in the law of attraction, then just know that by you starting to give yourself this love, you're going to start feeling a little better about yourself, which means you're going to take more actions that continue to support that feeling. And then that creates more momentum into more and more. That's why eventually you get to a place where you won't accept people treating you badly because you know you don't deserve it. Or you will get to a point where you won't stay at a job where you feel miserable because you know you're meant for more and you believe it. You believe that you're meant for more. Eventually, you might get to a place where you won't take a relationship where the guy doesn't treat you anything less than extraordinary because you know that that's all you deserve. But it takes that little step at a time. You cannot go from I despise myself to I love myself overnight. You have to, little by little, start taking those steps, little by little, little by little. And eventually, I tell this to my clients, you will get to a point where you are going through your day and all of a sudden you're going to notice that something is not right. And before you probably never noticed it because you were so disconnected. Now you notice it. And now you're like, interesting. And then you start the whole process of curiosity and compassion. But that's how you start, little by little.
That's so inspiring. It makes me feel calm and almost like this warmth as you talk. Yeah. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people because I think we all need a little more self-love. We all
do.
Yeah. In all different areas. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I could use a little more self-love there. I could use a little more self-love there, over there. Just thinking about those areas where I feel insecure, I might have emotions. And if I really dig deep, it's because I'm feeling not enough or I'm feeling like I'm not loving myself. It really comes down to that.
It really comes down to that. I was talking to someone yesterday, and again, you start somewhere, and as you start having those discussions, it inevitably ends up in, I'm not good enough. I don't feel I'm capable enough. I don't think I can do this. It always ends up in us thinking that we're less than who we really are.
Oh, yes, every time.
Isn't it? It always comes down to that.
Yes. I'm thinking of all my client conversations. It doesn't matter the topic. It comes down to that.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It always comes down to us thinking that we're less than we really are. That's why I say alignment is reminding yourself of who you really are. It's connecting with that person that who you really are. It always comes down to that.
I had a guest last year who said, really stuck with me. She said, it takes a lot of courage to be who we really are.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I think that's the journey of our lifetimes, really, which is we're born into these people that know who they really are. Then the first 10, 15 years of our life is about disconnecting ourselves from it and then just looking around, trying to find what to connect to. And it's like family expectations and religion and then society expectations. And then the rest of our lives is about reconnecting with that person, bringing ourselves back home.
Yeah.
It's really about that.
God. Yes. Oh, that really resonated with me. Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage and a lot of honesty. One of my favorite teachers is Abraham Hicks, and I talk often about Abraham. Like I'm obsessed with Abraham, I think. they have this class, they do a lot of recordings. You can find a lot of stuff in YouTube. And I remember hearing once this thing about imagine you grew up with your hands in the stove, in the hot stove. You don't know anything else. You think that's normal. You think that's what it is. And then they go through this whole thing when they're like, okay, take your hand off the stove. And you're like, well, what if? What if I take the hand of the stove and it's worse than me having the hand of the stove? Plus, who am I to take the hand of the stove? My mom had her hand on the stove. My grandpa had their hand on the stove. Like, who am I? And then you finally take the hand of the stove and you're like, why did it take me so long? And what a relief. And then now you want to tell everybody else to take the hand of the stove. And they're like, are you crazy? Why am I going to take the hand of the stove? I know.
Oh, that's a wonderful metaphor.
One of my favorite teachers. They're so amazing. And I always tell people, Abraham is one of the teachers that I love the most. I'm obsessed with it. I've been for 16 years.
Well, if somebody wants to learn more about that, Abraham Hicks, well, where would you recommend someone start if they've never heard of him?
Start with the first book, which is Ask and It Is Given. That's definitely the one-on-one on Abraham Hicks. Then there is so much free material in YouTube. That's another way I bring myself back into alignment. When I'm feeling myself disconnected, I literally listen to Abraham Hicks. That's another way I do it. And my husband jokes that he always knows something is happening because he starts hearing Abraham Hicks everywhere I go.
He's like, what's going on,
cleaning, I'm cleaning and I have Abraham Hicks. I'm putting on makeup and I have Abraham Hicks. Or I'm getting dressed. And he's like, what's going on? Something's happening. You're just listening to Abraham Hicks nonstop.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being with us today. This conversation has been such a gift. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's going to be so helpful for people.
Thank you for sharing this space with me.
Where can people follow you? Where can people find your book?
Yeah, so the book is anywhere where books are sold. And thank you so much for supporting my projects and Latina authors. And then anyone that wants to hear about my work, I often post in Instagram, Facebook. I'm obsessed with TikTok. I think it's that little girl that likes the dancing and the singing. So I'm there too. And I have a channel in YouTube. So the channel in YouTube actually has videos from the last 3 years. So it has hundreds of videos of me. And I also do classes and coaching. So they can find my website.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to post the links to your website, to your Facebook, Instagram, and your book, of course. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.